Have you ever noticed how the atmosphere of a moment can change without anyone saying a word? How an ordinary conversation suddenly feels different when you sense that someone's attention has settled entirely on you? Not casually, not politely, but with a kind of focused curiosity that makes you aware of your own presence in a new way. It may happen in the middle of a simple exchange, perhaps while you are explaining an idea, telling a small story, or even just listening while someone else speaks. And yet there is a subtle realization that grows in the background of your awareness. Someone in the room is unusually interested in you. Their attention lingers. Their reactions seem more engaged. And their focus feels almost anchored to your presence. In that quiet shift, something inside you awakens, because the experience of being genuinely noticed carries a strange emotional electricity that is difficult to ignore. I want you to pay attention to that sensation, because it reveals something deeply human about the way our minds work. The longing to be recognized, valued, and desired by others is not merely a social preference or a cultural habit. It is rooted in the psychological architecture of our species. Long before modern life complicated our relationships with attention and approval, human survival depended on connection with others. To be seen by the group meant belonging, protection, and importance within the community. To be ignored meant something very different. Because of that long evolutionary history, the human brain learned to interpret attention as significance. When someone focuses on you with genuine interest, the mind quietly translates that moment into a message. Your presence matters. This is why the feeling of captivating another person can be unexpectedly powerful. It does not always arrive in dramatic situations. Sometimes it emerges in the smallest interactions. A stranger becomes unusually engaged in a conversation with you. Someone begins asking thoughtful questions about your perspective rather than speaking about themselves. Another person listens to your ideas as if they carry weight rather than passing by them quickly. Moments like these often leave a lingering impression because they activate something inside the human psyche that rarely receives enough nourishment in everyday life. Many people move through the world with the quiet suspicion that they are simply blending into the background of other people's lives. They speak, work, socialize, and participate in countless interactions without feeling particularly memorable to anyone. When attention finally appears in a way that feels genuine, it creates a noticeable emotional contrast. Suddenly, the ordinary rhythm of social interaction becomes something more vivid. You become more aware of your words, your gestures, even the energy you bring into the conversation. What might seem like a simple moment of interest from another person begins to feel like confirmation that you are capable of capturing someone's attention in a meaningful way. What most people never stop to consider is that this experience of fascination rarely happens by accident. It is easy to assume that some individuals simply possess a natural charm that causes others to gravitate toward them automatically, while the rest of the population must remain observers of that phenomenon. Yet if you spend enough time watching the dynamics of human interaction, a different pattern begins to emerge. The people who consistently attract curiosity, admiration, or even quiet obsession are not always the loudest voices in the room, nor the most dramatic personalities. Very often they appear surprisingly calm, almost detached from the usual struggle for attention that surrounds them. Instead of constantly trying to impress others, these individuals seem deeply occupied with their own lives. They carry a sense of direction, an internal focus that gives their presence a certain gravity. When they speak, their thoughts feel considered rather than rushed. When they listen, their attention feels deliberate rather than distracted. They do not appear to be scanning the room for approval, nor do they behave as if they are performing for an invisible audience. And this difference, though subtle, changes how people respond to them. Human attention is drawn toward individuals who appear self-contained. When someone seems fully engaged in their own ambitions, interests, and experiences, it creates an aura of quiet independence. Others begin to sense that this person is not desperately seeking validation, and that realization alone makes their attention feel more valuable. Instead of scattering their energy everywhere, they seem to offer it selectively, and people instinctively begin wondering what it might mean to receive that attention. Curiosity often begins there. A person who appears centered in their own life naturally raises questions in the minds of others. What motivates them? What do they spend their time thinking about? What kind of experiences have shaped the way they see the world? These questions form silently in the background of people's thoughts, gradually transforming casual awareness into genuine interest. You might have experienced this yourself without recognizing it. Perhaps you met someone whose presence felt strangely compelling, even though they were not trying to dominate the conversation. Maybe they spoke thoughtfully, pausing before responding rather than rushing to fill every silence. Maybe they seemed comfortable with themselves in a way that felt uncommon. That sense of comfort often creates a ripple effect. When someone appears at ease within their own identity, others begin feeling more curious about them than they expected. The fascinating aspect of this dynamic is that magnetism often appears strongest in people who are not chasing it. The moment someone stops organizing their behavior around the need to impress others, something shifts in the way they move through the world. Their attention becomes invested in their own direction rather than scattered across countless attempts to gain approval. As a result, their presence begins to feel more grounded, more deliberate, and more difficult to overlook. This does not mean they ignore the people around them. Quite the opposite. Because they are not consumed by the anxiety of being judged, they are often able to listen more attentively and speak more authentically. Conversations with them feel different because they are not constantly filtering their thoughts through the question of whether they will be liked. Their responses emerge from genuine interest in the exchange itself, and that authenticity becomes surprisingly compelling. Over time, the effect of this orientation becomes visible in subtle ways. People begin remembering conversations with them more clearly. They pay closer attention to their opinions and reactions. They notice when the person enters a room or leaves it. What once felt like ordinary interaction gradually transforms into something more charged with curiosity. And the remarkable thing is that this entire process begins long before anyone consciously decides to admire or pursue them. It begins with a shift inside the individual themselves, a shift that moves their attention away from constant external validation and redirects it toward building a life that genuinely interests them. When someone reaches that point, something almost paradoxical occurs. The more absorbed they become in the development of their own life, the more attention they seem to attract from others. People begin sensing that there is depth behind their presence, a life unfolding beyond the surface of everyday conversation. Curiosity grows naturally in response to that depth, and sometimes the very quality that makes a person captivating is not anything they deliberately tried to display, but simply the quiet evidence that their life already contains something meaningful enough to hold their full attention. Let me ask you something that most people never pause long enough to consider. When you enter a room, when you join a conversation, when you begin interacting with the world around you, where is the center of your attention actually located? Is it anchored inside your own life, your own direction, your own inner sense of value? Or is it constantly drifting outward, searching for signals from other people that tell you how you should feel about yourself? This question may seem simple at first, but the answer quietly shapes the way others perceive you more than almost anything else. Many people live in a state where their emotional center exists somewhere outside of themselves. They measure their worth through reactions, through approval, through how warmly others respond to their presence. If a conversation flows easily, they feel confident. If someone appears distracted or indifferent, their energy begins to shrink. Their sense of value rises and falls depending on how much attention they receive. Because of this pattern, their presence becomes unstable, constantly adjusting itself to match the atmosphere around them. You can see this dynamic in countless interactions. A person enters a group and immediately begins scanning faces, looking for signs of acceptance. They laugh slightly louder than necessary, speak a little faster than they intend, and subtly reshape their personality in order to fit whatever tone seems most welcome. None of this is done consciously. It happens automatically, because somewhere deep inside the mind, there is a quiet fear of being overlooked or dismissed. That fear causes attention to flow outward instead of inward. Now imagine something very different. Imagine someone whose emotional center remains firmly rooted within themselves. When they walk into a room, they are not searching for approval signals. Their attention is already occupied by the life they are building, the ideas they are exploring, the direction they are moving toward. They participate in conversations with warmth and curiosity, but their sense of identity does not depend on how each interaction unfolds. If someone responds enthusiastically, they enjoy the moment. If someone seems distant or distracted, they remain unchanged. This type of stability creates a fascinating psychological effect. People are naturally drawn toward individuals who appear internally anchored, The reason is simple. A person who does not desperately need validation seems to possess something valuable already. Their presence suggests that their life contains meaning, direction, and self-assurance that exists independently of the immediate social environment, and that perception quietly changes the dynamics of attention. When someone appears overly eager for approval, others often sense it instinctively, even if they cannot explain why. The interaction begins to feel slightly unbalanced. The conversation carries an invisible pressure, as if one person is waiting for emotional confirmation from the other. Over time, that pressure can become exhausting, but when someone carries their own center within themselves, the emotional atmosphere shifts completely. There is no demand for reassurance. There is no hidden urgency to be liked. The interaction becomes lighter, more relaxed, and far more intriguing. This is where a concept that might sound unusual at first begins to reveal its importance, a certain degree of healthy self-obsession. Now, when I say self-obsession, I'm not speaking about arrogance or narcissism. I'm speaking about a deep engagement with your own life. It is the state of being genuinely fascinated with what you are building, learning, experiencing, and becoming. A person who possesses this quality does not wake up wondering whether the world will validate them today. They wake up thinking about their projects, their ideas, their curiosities, their plans for growth. Because their attention is invested in something meaningful, their presence becomes richer. Think about the difference between someone whose life revolves entirely around external reactions and someone who is deeply involved in their own evolution. The first person often feels uncertain, always adjusting themselves depending on the environment. The second person carries a sense of direction that makes them appear grounded even in unfamiliar situations. Their mind is occupied with questions, ambition, and discoveries that extend beyond the immediate conversation. People can feel that difference almost immediately. When someone is genuinely interested in their own development, their conversations become more engaging because they bring fresh thoughts and perspectives into the interaction. They are not merely echoing the expectations of others. They speak about ideas that excite them, experiences that have shaped them, and insights that have grown from their curiosity about the world. This internal engagement produces something powerful: self-assurance. Self-assurance is not loud. It does not require dramatic confidence or dominating energy. In many cases, it appears as a quiet steadiness in the way someone speaks and moves. They take their time forming responses. They do not rush to fill every silence. Their expressions feel thoughtful rather than reactive. This calm rhythm communicates something subtle but important. They trust their own presence, and trust in oneself has a contagious effect. When people encounter someone who seems comfortable within their own identity, it lowers the emotional tension in the interaction. Others begin to relax as well. Conversations feel less like performances and more like genuine exchanges. In that relaxed atmosphere, curiosity naturally begins to grow. The person who carries their own center becomes interesting not because they are trying to be impressive, but because their life appears internally alive. There is another aspect of this dynamic that is worth understanding. When someone treats their own life as meaningful, others begin to treat it that way too. If you behave as though your time, your attention, and your experiences matter, people unconsciously begin respecting those boundaries. They sense that your energy is invested in something valuable. On the other hand, when someone constantly abandons their own priorities in order to gain approval, others quickly learn that their attention is easily obtained. What is easily obtained rarely generates fascination. Scarcity, on the other hand, tends to amplify interest. When your attention belongs first to your own life, the moments you choose to share it with others feel more deliberate and therefore more valuable. This is why becoming your own center is such a transformative shift. Instead of moving through the world hoping that others will confirm your worth, you begin building a life that confirms it from within. Your curiosity about your own growth becomes stronger than your concern about how you are being perceived. And something remarkable begins happening when that shift occurs. People start noticing you differently, not because you are asking for attention, but because your attention is already invested somewhere meaningful. The person who stands at the center of their own life rarely needs to chase fascination. Curiosity tends to move toward them on its own. Now I want you to observe something about human nature that becomes obvious once you begin looking for it. People are not always attracted to what is easily available to them. In fact, the opposite often appears to be true. The things we desire most intensely are frequently the things that seem slightly out of reach, the qualities we feel we do not yet possess, or the emotional experiences we secretly wish existed in our lives. This pattern appears everywhere in relationships, in admiration, in curiosity, and even in the quiet fascination people feel towards certain individuals without fully understanding why. If you watch human behavior closely, you begin to notice that attraction is rarely random. The mind is constantly searching for something that feels missing, something that promises expansion, excitement, or completion in some form. When a person encounters someone who appears to embody that missing quality, attention naturally begins to gravitate toward them. It happens almost automatically, long before anyone consciously analyzes the situation. Imagine, for example, a person who lives with constant uncertainty about their direction in life. Their days feel scattered, their thoughts frequently pulled in different directions by obligations, worries, and expectations. When they encounter someone who appears calm, purposeful, and internally organized, the contrast immediately captures their attention. That individual seems to possess something the observer deeply desires: clarity and inner stability. Even if the interaction is brief, curiosity begins forming quietly in the background. A similar dynamic appears in many other forms. Someone who feels emotionally guarded may find themselves fascinated by a person who expresses warmth and openness without hesitation. A person who feels trapped in routine may become captivated by someone who seems adventurous and free. An individual who doubts their own confidence may feel drawn towards someone who carries themselves with quiet certainty. In each case, the attraction is not created by coincidence. It emerges because the mind recognizes a quality it secretly longs to experience. This psychological mechanism operates beneath the surface of most interactions, shaping how people perceive one another in ways that often remain invisible. The fascinating part is that people rarely admit the real reason for their curiosity. Instead, they describe it using vague language. They might say someone is interesting, different, or hard to explain. What they are actually sensing is the presence of a trait that contrasts with their own internal experience. You can think of this process as a kind of emotional magnetism created by contrast. When two people possess similar energies, their interaction may feel comfortable but not necessarily captivating. There is familiarity, but little mystery. When someone carries a quality that the other person lacks, however, the mind becomes far more attentive. The difference creates intrigue, and intrigue invites exploration. This is one reason why individuals who cultivate a strong inner life often attract unusual levels of attention without deliberately trying to do so. When someone is deeply engaged with their own growth, passion, and interests, their presence begins to feel expansive. Their conversations contain perspectives shaped by curiosity rather than habit. Their reactions feel thoughtful rather than automatic. To someone who feels confined within predictable routines, this type of presence can appear almost luminous. What makes the effect even more powerful is that people tend to project their own desires onto the individuals who capture their interest. When someone seems to embody a quality we admire, confidence, creativity, emotional stability, intellectual depth, the mind begins constructing stories about who that person must be. We imagine the experiences that shaped them, the thoughts that occupy their mind, the life they must be living beyond the moment we are sharing. In many cases, those imagined stories become more compelling than the facts themselves. This projection plays a significant role in the psychology of attraction. When a person carries themselves with authenticity and self-assurance, others begin filling in the unknown parts of their identity with positive assumptions. They assume there is depth behind the calmness, intelligence behind the quietness, and experience behind the confidence. The less information they have, the more their imagination becomes involved in constructing that image. You can see this phenomenon clearly when someone enters a social environment where most people are competing for attention in obvious ways. Loud voices, exaggerated stories, and constant displays of personality may dominate the room. Yet sometimes the individual who attracts the most curiosity is the one who remains calm, observant, and selective in their contributions. Their restraint creates contrast. Instead of revealing everything immediately, they allow their presence to unfold gradually. Because of this, others begin noticing them more carefully. They start wondering what that person is thinking while quietly observing the room. They become curious about what interests occupy their time outside the conversation. Even small comments from that individual begin to carry more weight simply because they are not delivered constantly. The scarcity of expression transforms each contribution into something worth paying attention to. Another important element of attraction psychology is emotional resonance. People are drawn not only to the qualities they lack, but also to the emotional states they wish to experience more often. When someone radiates calmness, enthusiasm, curiosity, or warmth, others begin associating those feelings with their presence. Being around them becomes a way of briefly stepping into a different emotional atmosphere. This is why the internal state you cultivate within your own life matters so much. If your life feels engaging and meaningful to you, that energy naturally appears in your interactions. You speak with more interest about what you care about. Your reactions feel genuine rather than forced. Your curiosity about the world becomes visible in the questions you ask and the perspectives you share. Others notice this vitality even if they cannot explain it directly. The moment someone senses that your life contains depth, their mind begins searching for ways to understand that depth. They want to know what drives you, what inspires you, what occupies your attention when you are alone with your thoughts. In other words, they begin wanting access to the inner world that seems to animate your presence. And that desire often begins not because you attempted to impress them, but because they sensed in you something they quietly wish existed within themselves. There is a quiet pattern that runs beneath almost every human interaction, and once you begin noticing it, you start seeing it everywhere. People rarely move through the world completely satisfied on an emotional level. Beneath their daily routines, beneath their responsibilities and conversations, there are usually certain needs that remain only partially fulfilled. Some people crave appreciation but rarely receive it. Others long to be understood but feel that no one truly listens. Some desire encouragement, warmth, stability, or intellectual companionship. Yet those experiences appear only occasionally in their lives. Because of this, every person carries invisible emotional gaps. Most of the time, these gaps remain unspoken. People continue with their work, their relationships, their obligations, and their social interactions while quietly adapting to whatever emotional environment surrounds them. They may not even consciously recognize what they are missing. Yet the moment someone enters their life who naturally provides that missing experience, something changes almost immediately. Attention sharpens, curiosity increases, and the interaction begins to feel far more significant than an ordinary conversation. This is one of the deepest mechanisms behind attraction. People are drawn toward individuals who seem to answer an emotional question they did not know how to articulate. Imagine someone who spends most of their days surrounded by conversations that feel rushed and superficial. Words are exchanged. Information moves quickly from one topic to another, but very little genuine listening occurs. When this person finally encounters someone who listens carefully, who pauses before responding, who asks thoughtful questions and seems genuinely interested in understanding them, the experience can feel surprisingly powerful. It is not simply pleasant, it feels rare. The mind recognizes that this interaction provides something that has been quietly missing. The same pattern appears in many other forms. A person who lives in a stressful environment may feel deeply drawn to someone who radiates calmness and emotional steadiness. Someone who often feels overlooked may become fascinated by a person who notices details and expresses appreciation naturally. A person who spends their life surrounded by predictability may feel energized by someone whose curiosity and enthusiasm bring freshness into every conversation. In each case, attraction emerges not from surface characteristics alone, but from emotional resonance. The individual becomes compelling because their presence fulfills a need that has been quietly waiting for recognition. You might think of it as becoming a kind of emotional answer within the lives of others, not in a manipulative sense, and not as a calculated strategy, but as a natural result of cultivating qualities that many people rarely encounter. When you develop genuine warmth, curiosity, steadiness, humor, insight, or attentiveness, those qualities begin to fill emotional spaces that others have been missing without realizing it. The fascinating part is that you do not need to be everything for everyone. Human beings are drawn to different emotional experiences depending on their own inner world. Some people crave intellectual stimulation, while others respond most strongly to empathy and emotional safety. Some are fascinated by creativity and imagination, while others admire calm confidence and stability. The important realization is that attraction often grows strongest where a meaningful emotional contrast exists. This means that the qualities you cultivate within yourself will naturally resonate with certain individuals more than others. Someone who values thoughtful conversation may feel deeply engaged by your perspective on ideas and experiences. Another person might be captivated by the way you bring humor and lightness into ordinary situations. Someone else might simply feel comforted by your calm presence during moments of stress. In each case, what draws them toward you is not merely what you say, but the emotional environment they experience in your presence. Think about the individuals who have made the strongest impression on you throughout your life. Often they are not the most dramatic personalities or the most conventionally impressive people. Instead, they are the ones who made you feel something meaningful when you were around them. Perhaps they made you feel understood when others seemed distracted. Perhaps they made you laugh in moments when life felt heavy. Perhaps they inspired you to think differently about your own possibilities. Those emotional experiences linger long after the conversation ends. What makes this dynamic even more interesting is that people rarely articulate the emotional reason behind their fascination. They might say someone is interesting, engaging, or different. But these descriptions are often placeholders for something deeper. What they are truly responding to is the feeling that arises in your presence. When someone consistently experiences a positive emotional shift while interacting with you, their mind begins associating your presence with that feeling. Over time, this association grows stronger. If conversations with you feel stimulating, they begin seeking those conversations more often. If your presence brings calmness into their day, they become more attentive whenever you appear. If your perspective encourages them to see their life in a more hopeful or curious way, they begin valuing your thoughts more than they expected. The remarkable thing is that this process often happens quietly. There is no dramatic announcement, no clear moment when someone decides to become fascinated. Instead, their attention slowly deepens because interacting with you continues to produce experiences that feel emotionally meaningful. This is why the cultivation of inner qualities matters so much. When your life becomes rich with curiosity, warmth, insight, humor, and authenticity, those qualities naturally appear in your interactions. You do not need to force them into conversations. They emerge organically from the way you think and feel. As a result, people begin experiencing something valuable simply by spending time with you. In a world where many interactions remain rushed, distracted, or emotionally neutral, a presence that offers genuine engagement becomes memorable. Conversations with you begin to stand out from the countless exchanges that fill most people's days, and gradually, without you needing to announce anything, your presence starts occupying a different place in the minds of the people around you, not because you demanded attention, but because interacting with you answered a need they had quietly carried for a long time. Let me shift your attention for a moment away from other people and bring it back to something much more important. Something that quietly determines how you move through the world long before anyone else begins responding to your presence. I want you to consider the rhythm of your own life, not the major events or achievements that people talk about publicly, but the small patterns that repeat every day, the invisible structure that shapes how your mind wakes up, how your energy flows, and how your attention is directed when no one is watching. Most people underestimate the power of these patterns. They assume magnetism, confidence, and emotional presence are qualities that appear suddenly or belong naturally to certain personalities. Yet if you look closely at individuals who seem captivating or deeply grounded, you will often find something surprisingly simple beneath their presence. Their lives are supported by personal rituals that create internal stability and meaning. A ritual is not merely a habit. A habit can exist almost unconsciously, repeated without much awareness. A ritual carries intention. It is an activity that you return to deliberately because it shapes your inner state in a way that matters to you. Over time, these rituals become more than actions. They form the invisible architecture of your identity. Think about the beginning of your day. For many people, the first moments after waking are chaotic. The mind is immediately flooded with notifications, responsibilities, messages, and expectations. Attention jumps from one task to another before the mind has even fully settled into awareness. When the day begins this way, the internal state often becomes reactive. Instead of moving through life with direction, The person spends most of their energy responding to whatever demands appear next. Now imagine something different. Imagine waking up and beginning the day with a small sequence of actions that belong entirely to you. Perhaps you sit quietly with a cup of coffee or tea while your thoughts organize themselves. Perhaps you write for a few minutes, allowing ideas to take shape before the noise of the world begins. Perhaps you stretch your body, breathe slowly, or read something that stimulates your curiosity. The specific activity does not matter as much as the intention behind it. What matters is that the moment is yours, and that you are beginning the day from a place of deliberate awareness rather than scattered reaction. This simple difference changes the internal atmosphere of your life. When you begin your day with a ritual that centers your attention, you quietly remind your mind that your life has direction. You are not merely drifting through circumstances, you are shaping the rhythm of your own experience. Over time, this repeated act of self-direction begins to influence how you see yourself. Instead of feeling like someone constantly reacting to events, you start feeling like someone actively building a life. That internal shift becomes visible to others in ways you might not expect. A person whose life is supported by meaningful rituals tends to carry a sense of calm organization. Their thoughts appear less rushed. Their speech becomes more deliberate. Their energy does not fluctuate wildly depending on external circumstances. When they speak about their interests or experiences, their enthusiasm feels genuine because it emerges from a life that contains real engagement rather than empty performance. People are naturally drawn toward individuals whose lives appear internally rich. When someone senses that you spend time exploring ideas, developing skills, nurturing your well-being, or pursuing creative interests, they begin perceiving you differently. Your presence no longer feels passive or routine. Instead, it suggests that there is a world unfolding behind your daily interactions. This perception creates curiosity. When someone seems genuinely engaged with their own life, others begin wondering what occupies their time and attention beyond the conversation they are currently sharing. They imagine the books you might be reading, the projects you might be developing, the places you might explore, the questions that might occupy your mind late at night. Even if you never describe these details explicitly, the structure of your life begins to suggest depth. Personal rituals contribute to this depth because they continually reinforce your relationship with your own growth. When you dedicate time to learning, reflection, creativity, or physical well-being, you are investing energy into experiences that expand your inner world. Each ritual becomes a small declaration that your life deserves attention and care. Over time, these declarations accumulate. A morning ritual may develop clarity of thought. A daily walk may become a space where ideas unfold naturally. Journaling might reveal patterns in your thinking that lead to new insights. Physical exercise might cultivate discipline and vitality. Creative work might open unexpected channels of expression. None of these actions need to be dramatic or elaborate. Their power lies in their consistency. Consistency creates identity. When you repeatedly engage in activities that nurture your mind and body, your sense of self gradually evolves. You begin seeing yourself as someone who grows, someone who explores, someone who invests energy into meaningful experiences. This self-perception influences how you carry yourself in subtle but important ways. Your confidence becomes quieter but more stable because it grows from lived experience rather than momentary approval. Another fascinating effect of personal rituals is that they generate emotional independence. When your life contains multiple sources of fulfillment, learning, creativity, movement, reflection, exploration, you no longer rely entirely on external interactions to feel energized. Your days contain moments that nourish you even when you are alone. This independence changes the way others experience your presence. Instead of appearing as someone seeking stimulation from others, you appear as someone who already carries a vibrant internal life. People often describe this quality as magnetism without fully understanding its origin. They sense that the individual is interesting, that conversations with them feel stimulating, that their perspective seems fresh. What they are actually noticing is the invisible influence of a life structured around meaningful engagement. And when someone builds a life that feels alive from the inside, that vitality naturally begins to radiate outward in every interaction. Let me draw your attention to something subtle that shapes fascination more than most people realize. It is not always the most expressive or talkative person who captures the deepest curiosity. Very often the opposite is true. The individuals who leave the strongest impression are those whose presence feels layered, as if there is more beneath the surface than what is immediately visible. When someone senses that another person cannot be completely understood in a single conversation, the mind begins doing something interesting. It starts leaning closer. Human curiosity thrives in the presence of partial knowledge. When everything about a person is immediately explained, their story becomes predictable, and predictability rarely holds attention for long. But when someone reveals themselves gradually, offering glimpses rather than complete explanations, the mind begins filling in the unknown spaces with imagination. Those spaces create intrigue, and intrigue is one of the quiet engines of attraction. This is where mystery enters the picture, not as a performance or a calculated game, but as a natural result of living a life that contains depth beyond what you choose to display at any given moment. A person who is constantly explaining themselves, constantly narrating every detail of their life, often leaves little room for curiosity to develop. The listener receives all the information immediately, and the conversation quickly reaches its emotional limit. But when someone allows certain aspects of their inner world to remain private until the right moment, each interaction begins to feel like the discovery of something new. Selective revelation is the art of allowing your life to unfold in conversation instead of presenting it all at once. It means speaking honestly, but with intention. When someone asks a question, you respond thoughtfully rather than rushing to provide every possible detail. When a topic arises that matters to you, you share the part that fits naturally into the moment, leaving space for deeper exploration later. The result is that your personality develops a rhythm. Conversations with you become experiences that evolve rather than information exchanges that conclude quickly. Another element that strengthens this rhythm is distance. And distance here does not mean coldness or emotional withdrawal. Instead, it refers to the presence of boundaries that protect the richness of your own life. In a world where many people feel compelled to be constantly available, responding instantly, sharing everything immediately, filling every silence with words, a person who maintains thoughtful space around their time and attention naturally appears different. When someone realizes that your life contains commitments, interests, and pursuits that occupy your attention, your presence begins to feel more valuable. You are not constantly seeking engagement because your energy already belongs to something meaningful. As a result, the moments you do choose to engage with others feel deliberate rather than habitual. That deliberate attention often carries more emotional weight. Consider how differently conversations feel when the other person seems fully present rather than casually multitasking through the interaction. When someone speaks with you while their attention is divided between several distractions, the exchange feels thin. But when someone turns their attention toward you intentionally, listening carefully and responding with focus, the moment becomes vivid. Maintaining distance in your life allows you to bring that kind of deliberate presence into your interactions. Mystery also grows naturally from a life that contains variety and curiosity. When you are exploring ideas, developing interests, reading, creating, or learning new things, your conversations naturally gain texture. Instead of repeating the same predictable stories, you bring fresh perspectives into the dialogue. People begin noticing that speaking with you often introduces them to thoughts or experiences they had not considered before. This freshness invites further curiosity. The mind starts wondering what else might exist in your world beyond what has already been revealed. It wonders what books you are reading, what ideas are occupying your thoughts, what projects might be unfolding quietly in the background of your life. The less predictable your internal world appears, the more engaging your presence becomes. Humor, creativity, and thoughtful pauses also contribute to this sense of intrigue. Someone who occasionally surprises others with an unexpected observation or a playful remark adds brightness to the conversation without overwhelming it. Humor delivered with subtlety often leaves a stronger impression than constant jokes because it appears spontaneously rather than as a performance. Equally powerful is the ability to remain comfortable with silence. Many people rush to fill every quiet moment in conversation because silence makes them nervous. Yet a thoughtful pause can create an atmosphere where words feel more meaningful. When someone pauses before responding, it suggests that they are considering the conversation carefully rather than reacting automatically. This small change in rhythm often makes others pay closer attention. Over time, these elements mystery, distance, selective revelation, curiosity, and thoughtful pacing begin forming a personality that feels both engaging and grounded. You are not withholding yourself in order to manipulate interest, nor are you exposing every detail immediately. Instead, you allow your presence to unfold gradually, giving others the experience of discovery. Discovery is a powerful emotional process. When people feel that they are gradually learning more about someone interesting, their attention deepens naturally. Each conversation becomes a continuation of something unfinished, a step further into understanding a person whose inner world feels layered and alive. And the most compelling aspect of this dynamic is that it rarely requires deliberate effort. When you are genuinely absorbed in building a life that fascinates you, mystery appears naturally because your experiences cannot be fully explained in a single moment. Others simply begin sensing that there is more to you than what they have seen so far. And that realization alone is often enough to keep their curiosity quietly engaged. Now, I want you to look at another force that shapes human attraction in a way that is often underestimated. Many people believe fascination grows from mystery alone, or from confidence, or from the appearance of independence. These qualities certainly play a role. Yet, if you observe human connections closely, you will notice that fascination rarely becomes deep or lasting unless something else appears alongside them. That element is emotional safety. The mind may become curious about someone who feels intriguing, but the heart only opens around someone who feels safe. Emotional safety is not something that can be created through words alone. It is communicated through subtle signals in the way a person listens, responds, and reacts to the feelings of others. When someone senses that they can express themselves without being dismissed, ridiculed, or misunderstood, their nervous system relaxes, the conversation changes tone, thoughts flow more freely, laughter becomes more genuine. In that relaxed emotional space, people begin revealing parts of themselves they normally keep hidden. This is where humor becomes unexpectedly powerful. Humor has a remarkable ability to dissolve tension between people. When two individuals laugh together, even briefly, their emotional defenses soften. Laughter tells the brain that the environment is safe enough to release control. It interrupts stress, quiets overthinking, and brings both people into the same emotional rhythm. A shared moment of amusement can transform a stiff interaction into something warm and alive within seconds. But the humor that creates real attraction is rarely forced. It does not rely on rehearsed jokes or exaggerated performances designed to impress. Instead, it grows naturally from awareness of the moment. Sometimes it appears as a light observation about a situation everyone in the room recognizes but has not mentioned. Sometimes it arrives as a playful remark that gently reframes a serious topic without dismissing it. And sometimes it appears simply as the ability to laugh at your own small imperfections, showing others that you do not need to appear flawless in order to feel comfortable with yourself. This type of humor creates connection because it invites others into a shared experience rather than placing them outside of it. When someone laughs with you instead of feeling like the target of the joke, the interaction becomes inclusive, the atmosphere becomes lighter, and people begin associating your presence with relief from the seriousness that often dominates everyday life. Compassion deepens that connection even further. Compassion is the ability to recognize the emotional reality of another person and respond to it with understanding rather than judgment. When someone shares a difficult experience or expresses uncertainty about their life, many conversations quickly become uncomfortable because the listener does not know how to respond. Some people attempt to solve the problem immediately. Others change the subject in order to avoid the emotional weight of the moment. But when someone listens calmly and acknowledges what the other person is feeling, something different happens. The speaker begins sensing that their emotions are being received rather than evaluated. They feel less alone inside their experience. This simple act of recognition can create a sense of trust that grows far beyond the original conversation. You may have noticed that certain individuals possess this ability naturally. Speaking with them feels easier. As if the conversation does not require constant self-monitoring, you do not feel the need to carefully edit every sentence. Instead, the exchange feels open and relaxed, as though the emotional atmosphere itself is supportive. People are drawn toward individuals who create that environment. In many social situations, individuals carry invisible tension. They worry about saying the wrong thing, being misunderstood, or revealing too much about themselves. When they encounter someone who responds with patience and empathy rather than quick judgment, the tension begins to dissolve. The conversation feels refreshing because it does not require constant emotional defense. Over time, this experience becomes memorable when someone repeatedly associates your presence with warmth, humor, and understanding. They begin looking forward to interacting with you. Conversations with you feel different from the countless routine exchanges they experience throughout the day. Instead of leaving the interaction mentally exhausted, they leave feeling lighter, clearer, or even inspired. This effect becomes even stronger when humor and compassion appear together. Humor brightens the emotional atmosphere, while compassion ensures that the brightness never becomes superficial. When someone can laugh easily yet still listen deeply, they create a balance that feels both stimulating and comforting. The conversation moves naturally between playfulness and sincerity, allowing both people to experience a fuller range of connection. Another important element of emotional safety is the ability to remain present when others reveal vulnerability. When someone shares uncertainty, disappointment, or personal struggle, your response shapes the emotional memory of that moment. If you react with impatience or indifference, the person learns that opening up carries risk. But if you respond with calm attention and thoughtful understanding, the moment becomes a foundation for trust. Trust has a powerful influence on attraction because it allows people to lower the boundaries they usually maintain around strangers. Once those boundaries soften, curiosity deepens into something more personal. The connection begins moving beyond surface conversation into the exploration of ideas, experiences, and emotions that rarely appear in ordinary interactions. Over time, individuals who consistently create this atmosphere become known for something difficult to define but easy to feel. Others describe them as warm, engaging, or simply enjoyable to be around. Yet what they are actually responding to is the emotional environment that person brings into the room. The presence of humor removes unnecessary tension. The presence of compassion invites openness. Together they create a space where people can relax enough to reveal who they truly are. And in a world where many interactions remain guarded and hurried, the experience of genuine emotional safety becomes something people remember long after the conversation ends. Let me invite you to consider a question that most people rarely ask themselves with complete honesty. If you were not seeking approval from anyone, if there were no audience watching your life, no expectations to meet and no impressions to manage, how would you choose to spend your time? What would you learn? What experiences would you pursue? What parts of your life would you nurture simply because they made you feel more alive? This question may sound simple, yet the way you answer it quietly determines the quality of the relationship you have with yourself. Many people move through life with their attention focused almost entirely outward. They invest enormous effort into relationships, responsibilities, careers, and social expectations. Yet the relationship they maintain with themselves often receives very little conscious care. Time is spent meeting obligations, solving problems, and responding to the needs of others, while the inner life remains something that is addressed only occasionally. Over time, this imbalance can create a subtle sense of emptiness, even in individuals who appear successful or socially connected. Now imagine approaching your own life with a slightly different orientation. Instead of waiting for external relationships to bring excitement, meaning, or validation into your days, you begin treating your own life as something worthy of curiosity and attention. You become interested in your own growth, your own experiences, your own development as a person. The focus shifts from asking what others might bring into your life to asking how you might enrich the life you are already living. This shift is where the idea of dating yourself begins to make sense. At first, the phrase may sound unusual, yet its meaning is beautifully simple. Dating someone means investing time and energy into understanding who they are, exploring experiences together, and creating moments that feel memorable. When you apply that same spirit of curiosity and care toward your own life, something powerful begins to unfold. You start exploring your interests more deeply. You begin discovering what genuinely excites your mind and energizes your body. You learn how to spend time in ways that make you feel engaged rather than merely occupied. This practice does not require dramatic lifestyle changes. Often it begins with small decisions that gradually reshape the way you experience your days. You might decide to explore a new subject that has always fascinated you but never received your full attention. You might take time to visit places that stimulate your curiosity. Whether that means a quiet cafe where you can read and reflect, or a new environment that invites fresh perspectives. You might begin cultivating skills that challenge your mind and expand your sense of capability. As these experiences accumulate, something important begins to change inside you. Your life starts feeling fuller, more textured, more personally meaningful. Instead of waiting for others to bring excitement into your world, you begin generating that excitement through your own engagement with life. Curiosity replaces boredom. Exploration replaces routine. This internal richness naturally influences the way others perceive you. When someone spends time developing themselves, learning, exploring, refining their thinking, caring for their health and well-being, their presence carries a different quality. Conversations with them feel alive because they bring fresh ideas and experiences into the exchange. Their enthusiasm for learning or discovery becomes visible in the way they speak about their interests. They seem engaged with life itself rather than merely moving through it. People notice this energy. They may not immediately understand why they feel drawn towards someone who carries it, but they sense that interacting with this person introduces them to a world that feels more expansive than the ordinary rhythm of everyday conversations. The person appears curious, engaged, and quietly evolving, and that sense of evolution naturally creates intrigue. Self-care plays an important role in this process as well. Though it is often misunderstood, self-care is sometimes presented as a temporary escape from stress, yet its deeper meaning is much more significant. True self-care is the practice of maintaining the physical, emotional, and intellectual well-being that allows you to live with clarity and vitality. When you care for your body through movement, nourishment, and rest, your energy becomes more stable. When you protect time for reflection and learning, your mind remains active and curious. When you allow space for creativity, exploration, and personal expression, your inner world expands beyond the narrow boundaries of obligation. These forms of care gradually transform the way you experience yourself. Instead of feeling drained by life's demands, you begin feeling strengthened by the ways you invest in your own well-being. Your confidence becomes quieter but deeper, because it arises from lived experience rather than temporary approval. Another fascinating effect of dating yourself is that it cultivates emotional independence. When your life contains activities and pursuits that genuinely fulfill you, you are no longer dependent on constant external stimulation in order to feel engaged. You have sources of inspiration and enjoyment that exist regardless of who else is present. This independence changes the emotional tone of your relationships. Rather than approaching interactions with an unspoken need to receive excitement, validation, or entertainment, you approach them from a place of already having a meaningful life. Your conversations become contributions rather than requests. You share ideas, stories, and perspectives because they interest you, not because you are trying to gain approval. This difference often makes your presence feel refreshing to others. People can sense when someone is building a life that feels authentic to them. They notice the enthusiasm that appears when the person speaks about something they genuinely care about. They sense the calm confidence that comes from someone who values their own time and experiences. Interactions with such individuals feel energizing because their attention carries intention rather than restlessness. Over time, investing in self-improvement and self-care transforms your relationship with yourself in ways that ripple outward into every area of your life. You begin seeing your life not as a sequence of obligations, but as an unfolding journey of discovery. Each experience becomes an opportunity to learn something new about the world or about yourself. And when someone lives with that sense of exploration, their presence quietly reflects the fact that their life is already filled with meaning worth sharing. Let me slow this down for a moment and ask you to look at something that most people overlook because it feels too ordinary to notice. The way you live your everyday life, how you carry yourself in small decisions, how you treat your time, how you allow others to interact with you, quietly communicates a message long before you try to explain anything about who you are. People often believe attraction or respect begins with charisma, appearance, or clever conversation. Yet what shapes those reactions far more consistently is something deeper, the standards you live by. Standards are not loud declarations. They are patterns. They appear in the choices you repeat day after day, the way you organize your time, the level of care you bring to your work, the attention you give to your health, the tone you use when speaking about yourself, the kinds of situations you remain in, and the ones you quietly step away from. All of these small behaviors combine into a signal that other people learn to read almost instinctively. You may not notice it while you are living your day, but the people around you are constantly interpreting that signal. Human beings are extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional and behavioral cues of others. When someone consistently behaves as though their life carries value, people begin treating that life as valuable. When someone repeatedly compromises their own boundaries in order to gain approval, others often respond by lowering their expectations of how they should treat that person. This is not cruelty, it is pattern recognition. People respond to the way you position yourself in your own life. Think about someone you have met who seemed to possess a quiet sense of dignity. They did not dominate conversations or insist on attention. Yet there was something about the way they carried themselves that naturally commanded respect. They listened carefully when others spoke, but they did not allow conversations to drift into disrespectful territory. They offered their thoughts calmly, without rushing to defend themselves or prove their worth. When they made decisions about how to spend their time, those decisions appeared deliberate rather than reactive. What you were sensing in that person was daily self-respect. Self-respect is not a performance reserved for important moments. It is built through the accumulation of small acts that reinforce the idea that your life deserves care and intention. When you maintain standards for how you live, you begin shaping your internal environment in ways that eventually become visible to others. Consider the way you manage your time. Time is one of the clearest expressions of self-respect because it represents the finite portion of life you possess. When someone treats their time as something meaningful, they naturally become more selective about how it is used. They invest energy in activities that develop their mind, strengthen their body, and deepen their understanding of the world. They remain open to new experiences and relationships, yet they avoid allowing their days to become consumed by situations that drain their energy without offering growth or fulfillment. This selectivity does not make them distant or arrogant. Instead, it creates clarity. Others begin recognizing that this person values their life enough to protect the rhythm of it. Conversations with them feel intentional because their attention is not scattered across countless distractions. Another powerful expression of self-respect appears in the way you speak about yourself. Many people underestimate how influential their own language becomes over time. When someone frequently minimizes their accomplishments, apologizes unnecessarily for their presence, or speaks about themselves with subtle negativity, that tone gradually shapes how others perceive them. Words create expectations. If a person consistently describes themselves as uncertain or unimportant, people begin interacting with them through that lens. The opposite is equally true. When someone speaks about their experiences and ideas with calm clarity, without exaggeration or self-doubt, their words carry a different energy. They do not need to boast or dominate the conversation. The quiet certainty in their voice communicates that they trust their own perspective. That trust becomes contagious. Others begin listening more carefully because the speaker appears grounded in their own identity. Boundaries also play a crucial role in maintaining standards. A boundary is simply a decision about what kind of behavior or environment you are willing to remain within. When someone repeatedly tolerates situations that undermine their well-being, whether through disrespectful conversations, chaotic environments, or relationships that constantly drain their energy, they gradually weaken the sense of value surrounding their life. But when a person calmly steps away from environments that conflict with their standards, they reinforce the message that their well-being matters. They do not create conflict unnecessarily, nor do they attempt to control others. Instead, they simply choose where their presence will and will not remain. This quiet selectivity often commands more respect than any argument could achieve. The fascinating part of this process is that it operates continuously. Every day you are communicating something about how you value your own life. The way you approach work, the care you give your physical and mental health, the attention you bring into conversations, the environments you remain in, all of these behaviors accumulate into a consistent, energetic message. Over time, people begin responding to that message. If your life appears scattered, constantly reacting to circumstances and other people's expectations, others will unconsciously treat your presence as flexible and easily redirected. If your life reflects intention and personal standards, others often begin adjusting their behavior accordingly. They sense that your time, your attention, and your presence carry weight. This does not happen because you demand respect. It happens because the way you live demonstrates that you already possess it for yourself. Daily self-respect has another important effect as well. It strengthens your internal stability. When you consistently act in alignment with your values, your sense of identity becomes clearer. Decisions become easier because they are guided by principles rather than momentary emotions. Your confidence grows quietly because your actions repeatedly confirm that you are capable of directing your own life. And when someone carries that quiet stability, their presence begins to feel grounded in a way that others immediately notice, not because they are trying to impress anyone, but because the rhythm of their life reveals that they take themselves seriously enough to live with intention. Let me ask you to notice something about the way people interpret each other before a single conversation begins. Long before words are exchanged, long before personality has a chance to unfold, the human mind is already forming impressions. These impressions do not come from complex analysis. They emerge from small visual cues: the way someone dresses, how they carry their body, the care they give to their appearance, the subtle details that reveal how they see themselves. Without realizing it, people are constantly reading these signals, translating them into assumptions about identity, confidence, discipline, and even ambition. Appearance, in this sense, is not simply about fashion or attractiveness. It is a form of communication. The way you present yourself becomes a visual language through which others begin interpreting your story. They may not know your experiences, your thoughts, or your character yet, but they immediately begin forming a sense of who you might be based on the signals you send through style and grooming. I want you to understand something important here, because many people misunderstand the purpose of appearance. Personal style is not about impressing others or chasing approval. When approached consciously, it becomes a tool for reinforcing your own identity. The way you dress, the attention you give to grooming, the atmosphere you create through your physical presence, all of these choices can quietly support the version of yourself you are growing into. Think about how clothing and physical presentation influence your internal state. When you wear something that feels aligned with the person you want to be, your posture changes slightly, your movements become more deliberate, your awareness of your own presence becomes sharper. It is not that the clothing itself creates confidence. Rather, it acts as a physical reminder of the identity you are choosing to embody. This relationship between appearance and identity has existed throughout human history. Every culture has used clothing and adornment to signal status. 2. Role, personality, or belonging. A uniform tells others about profession. Certain styles suggest creativity, discipline, elegance, or practicality. Even in everyday situations, people subconsciously interpret the details of appearance as clues about how someone organizes their life. When someone consistently presents themselves with care, others begin assuming that this care extends into other areas of life as well. Attention to grooming suggests self-awareness. Cleanliness and thoughtful clothing choices suggest discipline. A distinctive sense of style suggests creativity or confidence. These interpretations may not always be perfectly accurate, but they strongly influence first impressions. What makes personal style truly powerful, however, is its ability to reshape how you see yourself. When someone decides to refine their appearance intentionally, they are often doing more than changing clothes or grooming habits. They are redefining the narrative they hold about who they are becoming. Imagine someone who has spent years moving through life without paying much attention to their physical presentation. Perhaps they dressed only for convenience or habit, never considering how their appearance influenced their energy. If that person begins experimenting with style, choosing clothing that reflects their evolving identity, maintaining consistent grooming, and presenting themselves with deliberate care, they often experience an internal shift. The mirror begins reflecting a version of themselves that feels more aligned with their aspirations. This alignment gradually influences behavior. When someone sees themselves as more composed, more confident, or more refined, they often begin acting in ways that support that identity. Their posture becomes straighter, their movements become more intentional. They enter rooms with a slightly stronger sense of presence because their physical appearance reinforces the idea that they belong there. People around them notice these changes as well. Human perception is highly visual. Even before we understand someone's personality, we respond to the signals their appearance sends about how they value themselves. A person who maintains thoughtful grooming and personal style communicates something subtle but important. They take themselves seriously enough to present their life with intention. This does not mean that style must follow trends or expensive brands. In fact, the most compelling personal styles often emerge from authenticity rather than imitation. Someone who dresses in a way that genuinely reflects their personality tends to appear more interesting than someone who simply copies what is fashionable. Authentic style carries coherence. It feels natural rather than forced. For some people, this might mean clean, minimal clothing that emphasizes clarity and simplicity. For others, it might mean expressive combinations that reveal creativity and individuality. Some individuals cultivate elegance and refinement, while others emphasize practicality and understated confidence. The specific form matters less than the consistency with which it reflects the person's identity. Grooming plays an equally significant role in this process. Small details maintaining cleanliness, caring for hair, skin, posture, and overall presentation send signals about self-respect. These details do not require extravagance. They simply demonstrate that a person values their own well-being enough to maintain themselves with care. Over time, these signals accumulate into a visual impression that becomes part of your overall presence. People begin recognizing you not only by your voice or personality, but by the atmosphere you carry into a room. Your appearance becomes a reflection of the identity you are shaping through your daily choices. Another interesting aspect of personal style is that it evolves alongside your personal growth. As your interests expand and your understanding of yourself deepens, your outward presentation often changes as well. Clothing that once felt appropriate may no longer reflect who you are becoming. New styles may begin appearing naturally as you explore different environments, ideas, and experiences. This evolution is not superficial. It is a visible representation of internal transformation. When someone consciously refines their appearance while also investing in their character, their presence begins to feel cohesive. The external and internal aspects of identity start reinforcing each other. The way they think, speak, and present themselves forms a consistent story that others can sense immediately. And when that coherence appears, the impression it creates often goes far beyond appearance itself. People begin perceiving someone whose life seems intentional, someone who understands the image they project and the identity they are cultivating. All of that communication begins before the first word of a conversation is even spoken. When a person begins living with standards and self-respect, something interesting starts to change in ways that go beyond their thoughts or behavior. It slowly begins showing up in visible form. The way they move becomes more deliberate. The way they enter a room carries a little more calm certainty. And even the way they present themselves to the world starts reflecting that inner shift. Self-respect rarely stays hidden for long. Eventually it becomes visible in posture, in habits, and very often in appearance. This is why appearance should never be understood as something shallow or disconnected from identity. The way you present yourself physically is often the first place where inner transformation becomes visible. Before someone has heard your ideas or experienced your personality, they are already reading signals from your presence. The mind naturally pays attention to clothing, grooming, posture, and physical details because these elements quietly communicate how a person relates to themselves. Most people do not consciously think about this process, but they respond to it instinctively. When someone carries themselves with care and intention, the impression they create is different from someone who moves through the world without much awareness of their presentation. Clothing that fits well, grooming that appears consistent, posture that feels composed. These details create a subtle sense that the person values themselves and the life they are building, even if observers cannot explain exactly why. They begin assuming that this individual approaches other parts of life with similar attention. Personal style becomes powerful precisely because it sits at the intersection between identity and visibility. It is one of the ways the internal story you are writing about yourself becomes visible to the outside world. The way you dress, the atmosphere you create through your appearance, and the small decisions you make about how you present yourself all contribute to the narrative you project. Think about how your own energy changes depending on what you are wearing. There are certain clothes that make you feel invisible, almost as if you are fading into the background of the room. And there are other moments when something as simple as well-fitted clothing, a clean appearance, or a thoughtful combination of colors can subtly shift how you carry yourself. Your posture becomes straighter, your movements more deliberate, and your awareness of your own presence becomes stronger. This happens because appearance influences psychology. When your outward presentation aligns with the person you believe yourself to be becoming, your mind receives a form of reinforcement. You are not merely imagining the identity you want to grow into, you are seeing it reflected back at you physically. That reflection strengthens confidence in quiet ways. Each time you catch your reflection or feel comfortable in your own presence, the image reinforces the internal story you are building. For this reason, personal style can become a tool for reinvention throughout life. There are moments when people begin transforming internally. They develop new ambitions, new interests, and new ways of thinking about themselves. Yet their appearance sometimes remains tied to an earlier version of their identity. When the external presentation finally evolves to match the internal transformation, something clicks into place. The outside and the inside begin telling the same story. You may have seen this happen to people around you. Someone who once appeared uncertain begins refining their appearance as their confidence grows. Their clothing becomes more intentional, their grooming more consistent, their presence more composed. The transformation is rarely dramatic in a single moment. Instead, it unfolds gradually, as the person's evolving identity begins expressing itself through their physical presentation. Others notice these changes quickly. Human perception is extremely responsive to visual cues. When someone appears organized, intentional, and comfortable in their appearance, people instinctively interpret that as a sign of discipline and self-awareness. Even small details can shape this impression. Cleanliness, posture, well-chosen clothing, and a sense of personal style all suggest that a person is attentive to their own life. It is important to understand that style does not require extravagance or luxury. The most compelling personal styles often appear simple and authentic. Someone who dresses in a way that genuinely reflects their personality often leaves a stronger impression than someone chasing trends or copying what others are wearing. Authenticity creates coherence, and coherence is what makes a presence memorable. For some individuals, this authenticity might express itself through minimal and refined clothing that communicates clarity and focus. For others, it may appear in more creative or expressive styles that reveal curiosity and individuality. What matters most is that the style feels consistent with the person's identity rather than imposed by external expectations. Grooming plays an equally important role in this process. Small habits maintaining cleanliness, caring for hair and skin, paying attention to posture and body language communicate self-respect in ways that require no explanation. These details may seem ordinary, but together they create an atmosphere around a person that suggests intention. When someone appears consistently well-kept, others often assume that the same level of care extends into their work, relationships, and responsibilities. Another fascinating aspect of personal style is how it evolves alongside personal growth. As your experiences expand and your understanding of yourself deepens, your outward presentation often changes naturally. Clothing that once felt comfortable may begin to feel misaligned with the direction you are moving. New styles may appear as reflections of your evolving identity. This evolution is not superficial. It is visible evidence that a person is growing. When the internal and external aspects of identity begin aligning, the result is a presence that feels coherent. The way you think, the way you speak, and the way you present yourself begin reinforcing the same story. Others may not consciously analyze that alignment, but they sense it. And when someone's appearance quietly reflects the life they are intentionally building, their presence begins speaking even before they do. Once a person begins refining their standards, shaping their life intentionally, and aligning their outer presence with the identity they are growing into, something else begins to happen almost naturally. Their attention starts moving toward people who seem to live with a similar level of clarity. They begin noticing individuals who carry a certain gravity in the way they think, speak, and move through the world. These might be people they meet in real life, thinkers they read about, creators they observe, or leaders whose presence leaves a lasting impression. At some point, the question quietly appears, what is it about these people that makes them so compelling? Most individuals assume magnetism comes from talent, intelligence, or luck. Yet if you study the people you admire carefully, something deeper becomes visible. The real difference often lies in how they think about themselves and their place in the world. Their mindset shapes their actions long before their actions shape their reputation. Mindset is the invisible architecture behind every form of presence. When you observe someone who seems magnetic, you're often witnessing the result of years spent thinking differently from the average person. These individuals tend to carry certain mental habits that shape the way they interpret challenges, opportunities, and even ordinary conversations. They approach situations with curiosity rather than hesitation. They speak about ideas with conviction because they have spent time developing those ideas internally. They appear calm in environments where others become uncertain because their thinking is anchored in a larger sense of direction. The fascinating thing is that these mental habits can be learned. Human beings have always evolved by observing and adopting the patterns of those they respect. Long before formal education existed, knowledge passed from person to person through imitation. Young individuals watched the behavior of experienced members of the community and gradually integrated those patterns into their own lives. This process did not require copying every detail of someone else's personality. Instead, it involved understanding the mindset that guided their actions. The same process still works today. When you encounter someone whose presence you admire, it is useful to look beyond surface characteristics and examine how they think. Ask yourself what assumptions shape their behavior. How do they respond to uncertainty? What beliefs guide their decisions? What kind of relationship do they have with failure, learning, and growth? These questions reveal the internal framework that supports their external behavior. For example, many magnetic individuals share a similar relationship with learning. Instead of seeing knowledge as something that ends after formal education, they treat learning as a continuous process. Their curiosity does not disappear when they become successful. In fact, it often intensifies. They read widely, ask questions frequently, and explore ideas that challenge their existing beliefs. Because of this intellectual engagement, conversations with them feel stimulating. Their perspective evolves constantly, which keeps their presence fresh and unpredictable. Another common pattern appears in the way they approach challenges. People who carry strong presence rarely see difficulty as a signal to retreat. Instead, they interpret obstacles as information about what needs to be improved. When something fails, they study the situation to adjust their approach and try again with greater understanding. This relationship with challenge creates resilience, and resilience becomes visible in the way they carry themselves. They do not panic easily because they have trained their minds to view setbacks as part of growth rather than as personal defeat. Confidence grows naturally from this mindset. True confidence rarely comes from temporary success or praise from others. It develops from repeated experiences of solving problems, learning new skills, and navigating uncertainty. When someone knows they can adapt, their sense of stability becomes internal rather than dependent on external conditions. Others notice this stability immediately. Conversations with such individuals feel grounded because their thoughts are not easily shaken by momentary pressures. There is another element of mindset that contributes to magnetism as well: responsibility for one's own life. People who inspire admiration often carry a strong sense of ownership over their choices. They do not spend much time blaming circumstances, other people, or past experiences for their current situation. Instead, they focus on what they can build from where they are. This orientation gives their life direction. Rather than reacting endlessly to events, they actively shape their environment and their future. When you begin adopting this type of mindset, your presence changes gradually but noticeably. You start approaching conversations with curiosity rather than hesitation. Your ideas become clearer because you have spent time thinking about them. You become more comfortable expressing your perspective because it grows from reflection rather than impulse. Instead of searching constantly for approval, you begin focusing on understanding and exploring the world around you. This shift often surprises the people around you. They may not realize exactly what has changed, yet they begin noticing that your presence feels different. Your words carry more clarity. Your reactions feel calmer. Your conversations introduce new perspectives rather than repeating familiar patterns. What they are witnessing is the external expression of a mindset that has become more intentional. At this point, something important should be understood. Embodying the mindset of people you admire does not mean becoming a copy of them. Every individual possesses a unique personality, history, and perspective. The goal is not imitation, but integration. You are observing the principles that shape their thinking and adapting those principles to your own life. Over time, these adopted mental habits become part of your identity. Your curiosity deepens because you have trained yourself to seek knowledge. Your resilience strengthens because you have practiced responding to difficulty with patience rather than frustration. Your confidence grows because you have experienced the results of thinking independently and acting deliberately. And when those patterns become consistent, the magnetism you once admired in others begins appearing quietly within your own presence. As you begin embodying stronger standards, refining your identity, and adopting the mindset of people who move through life with clarity and purpose, something interesting starts to shift in your interactions with others. Conversations begin to feel less like performances and more like genuine exchanges. You become less concerned with how you appear in every moment and more interested in what is actually happening between you and the person in front of you. That shift opens the door to something far more powerful than surface fascination. It allows emotional connection to emerge. Most people underestimate how rare true attention. Conversations often happen while minds are divided between phones, responsibilities, and internal distractions. People speak, but they are not always heard. Words are exchanged quickly, yet the deeper meaning behind those words often disappears before it can be explored. Because of this, many individuals carry a quiet sense that they move through their days without being fully understood. This is where the ability to listen becomes incredibly valuable. Listening, when practiced sincerely, is far more than remaining silent while someone else speaks. It is the act of placing your attention fully inside the conversation. Instead of waiting for your turn to respond or preparing the next sentence in advance, you allow yourself to become genuinely curious about what the other person is expressing. Their tone, their choice of words, the emotions behind their story, all of these elements begin revealing something about their inner world. When someone senses that they are being listened to with that level of attention, the emotional atmosphere changes almost immediately. Their voice relaxes, their thoughts become clearer. They begin sharing ideas and experiences that might otherwise remain unspoken. The conversation moves beyond polite exchange and begins entering a space where two people are actually discovering something about each other. Curiosity plays a crucial role in creating this space. Many conversations remain shallow simply because curiosity is absent. People ask routine questions and receive routine answers, never exploring the deeper layers of the other person's experience. But when genuine curiosity appears, the dialogue begins expanding naturally. Instead of responding with predictable comments, you begin asking thoughtful questions that invite reflection. You become interested not only in what someone has done, but in what they learned from it. What surprised them? What changed their perspective? Curiosity communicates respect. When you show interest in someone's thoughts and experiences, you signal that their inner world is worth exploring. This validation can be surprisingly meaningful because many individuals rarely encounter someone who wants to understand them rather than simply talk about themselves. The more sincere your curiosity becomes, the more the conversation begins, feeling like a shared exploration rather than a social obligation. Over time, this shared exploration creates emotional connection. Emotional connection does not grow from impressive statements or dramatic gestures. It develops through moments when two people feel understood within the same experience. When someone describes a challenge they faced and you respond with genuine empathy, the moment becomes memorable. When you share an observation that resonates with something they have felt but never expressed clearly, the connection deepens. These moments create a sense that the interaction carries meaning beyond ordinary conversation. Shared experiences strengthen this connection even further. When people participate in something together, whether it is discussing an idea, exploring a place, solving a problem, or simply enjoying a moment of humor, their minds begin associating each other with that experience. The memory becomes linked to the presence of the other person. Over time, these shared moments accumulate into a feeling that the relationship contains depth and familiarity. You may have noticed that some conversations seem to disappear from memory almost instantly, while others remain vivid long afterward. The difference usually lies in emotional engagement. When two people feel present and curious within the interaction, their minds record the experience more vividly. It becomes a story worth remembering rather than a routine exchange. Another element that strengthens emotional connection is openness. Openness does not mean revealing every detail of your life immediately. Instead, it involves allowing moments of authenticity to appear naturally within conversation. When someone shares something meaningful, responding with sincerity rather than distance encourages them to remain open. If you occasionally share your own experiences with honesty and reflection, the conversation becomes balanced. Both people begin contributing to the exploration of ideas and emotions. This balance prevents the interaction from becoming one-sided. If only one person reveals their thoughts while the other remains guarded, the conversation may feel incomplete. But when both individuals gradually share insights and experiences, the exchange becomes collaborative. Each person's story adds another layer to the connection. Over time, people begin recognizing the difference between ordinary conversation and the kind of interaction that creates emotional depth. They remember how they felt while speaking with you. They recall the sense of being understood or the moment when a shared insight made both of you pause and reflect. That memory becomes the foundation of attraction in a deeper sense. Fascination may begin with curiosity, appearance, or presence, but emotional connection is what allows relationships to grow beyond that initial intrigue. When someone associates your presence with meaningful conversation, thoughtful listening, and genuine curiosity, they begin seeking those experiences again. Not because you demanded attention, but because interacting with you allowed them to feel something that is becoming increasingly rare in everyday life. The feeling of being truly heard and understood. When emotional connection begins to deepen between two people, something beautiful often appears. Yet something delicate appears alongside it as well. The warmth of shared understanding, meaningful conversations, and growing closeness can make life feel more vivid than it did before. Time spent together becomes something both people look forward to, and gradually a new rhythm begins forming inside the relationship. Yet this is also the moment where many individuals unknowingly begin drifting away from one of the most important elements of a healthy and magnetic life, the life they were building before the relationship ever began. You may have seen this happen to people around you, or perhaps you have experienced it yourself at some point. When someone falls deeply into love or emotional attachment, their world can begin narrowing without them realizing it. Interests that once energized them quietly fade into the background. Personal goals become postponed. Time that was once spent exploring ideas, building skills, or nurturing personal growth gradually becomes centered almost entirely around the relationship. At first, this shift may feel natural. After all, when two people care deeply about each other, it is normal to want to share more time and attention. But when the relationship becomes the sole focus of a person's emotional world, something important begins to weaken. The independent life that once made that person interesting, vibrant, and curious slowly loses its momentum. And when that happens, the dynamic of attraction often changes in subtle ways. One of the reasons two people feel drawn to each other in the beginning is because each individual brings their own life into the connection. Each person carries their own passions, experiences, ambition, and perspectives. These differences create curiosity and admiration. When someone speaks about the things they are building in their life, the other person begins seeing them as someone who exists within a larger story. But if one person gradually abandons that story in order to revolve entirely around the relationship, the balance begins shifting. Instead of two lives meeting and expanding together, the relationship becomes the center of one person's identity. The independence that once felt intriguing slowly disappears, and the connection may begin feeling heavier than it did before. Maintaining your own life does not weaken love, it strengthens it. When you continue investing in your growth, your interests, and your personal direction, you bring vitality back into the relationship each time you reconnect with your partner. Your conversations remain rich because you are constantly learning, experiencing, and evolving. Your presence carries energy because your life continues moving forward rather than becoming stagnant. Think about how engaging it feels to speak with someone who is genuinely excited about what they are building in their life. Their enthusiasm becomes contagious. Their stories introduce new ideas and experiences into the conversation. Their perspective continues evolving because they are actively exploring the world rather than standing still. That kind of vitality is one of the foundations of lasting attraction. Growth plays a central role in preserving this vitality. A person who continues developing their mind, their skills, and their understanding of life naturally carries a sense of forward motion. They remain curious about the world around them. They pursue challenges that stretch their abilities. They remain open to learning and discovering new perspectives. When two people maintain this orientation toward growth, the relationship becomes a meeting point between two evolving lives. Each person contributes new insights, experiences, and ideas that enrich the connection. Instead of relying solely on past memories or routine interactions, the relationship continues expanding. Purpose is another essential element in maintaining a strong personal life. Purpose does not always mean a dramatic mission or a clearly defined career path. It can appear in many forms: creative work, intellectual exploration, meaningful projects, service to others, or personal goals that give direction to your energy. What matters is that your life contains something that motivates you beyond the relationship itself. When someone lives with purpose, their time and attention naturally organize themselves around meaningful activities. Their days contain structure and intention. They wake up with a sense that there are things worth building, learning, or contributing to the world. This sense of purpose prevents emotional dependence from forming inside the relationship. Instead of expecting the relationship to provide constant fulfillment, the individual already experiences fulfillment through the life they are living. The relationship becomes an addition to that life rather than a replacement for it. This creates emotional balance. Both people remain connected while still maintaining their own identities. There is also a deeper psychological reason why maintaining your own life strengthens attraction. Human beings are naturally drawn toward individuals who appear self-directed. When someone continues pursuing their interests, protecting their time for growth, and honoring their personal direction, their presence carries independence. Independence creates a sense that the person chooses to be in the relationship rather than needing it in order to feel complete. Choice is far more powerful than dependency. When someone feels that their partner remains connected to their own ambitions and passions, the relationship becomes a space where two independent lives support each other rather than restricting each other. Each person respects the other's individuality while still enjoying the closeness they share. Over time, this balance creates a relationship that feels both stable and alive. The two individuals remain emotionally connected, yet neither person disappears inside the other's life. Their separate interests, friendships, and ambitions continue shaping who they are. Each time they come together, they bring the richness of those experiences back into the relationship. And in that way, love becomes not something that replaces your life, but something that grows alongside it, allowing both people to continue becoming the fullest versions of themselves. At some point in life, almost everyone encounters a moment when a relationship that once felt meaningful comes to an end. It may happen gradually, through distance and quiet changes that build over time, or it may arrive suddenly, leaving behind a sense of confusion that lingers long after the final conversation has ended. However it appears, heartbreak has a way of shaking the emotional ground beneath you. The routines that once felt familiar suddenly carry a different atmosphere, and the future you imagined with someone else dissolves into uncertainty. In moments like these, many people feel as though they have lost not only the relationship, but a part of themselves as well. Time that was once shared now feels empty. Conversations that once filled the day are replaced by silence. The mind begins replaying memories, wondering what could have been different, analyzing small details in search of explanations. It is easy to become trapped inside this cycle of reflection, where the past feels more vivid than the present. Yet heartbreak, painful as it can be, also carries within it the possibility of rediscovering your own life. When a relationship ends, the emotional energy that once flowed into that connection suddenly becomes available again. At first, it may appear only as restlessness or sadness, but beneath those feelings lies the raw material needed to rebuild your sense of direction. The challenge is not simply to move on quickly, but to use this moment to reconnect with the parts of your life that may have been quietly waiting for your attention. One of the most powerful tools for reclaiming stability after heartbreak is the restoration of routine. Routine provides structure when emotions feel unpredictable. In the early days after a difficult separation, the mind often drifts between memories and imagined scenarios, creating a sense of emotional turbulence. Simple daily rhythms can gently interrupt that turbulence. Waking at consistent times, moving your body through exercise or walking, preparing meals with care, and dedicating time to focused activities gradually reintroduce a sense of order. These routines do not erase emotional pain immediately, but they give your mind something steady to return to. Each small act of structure becomes a reminder that life continues moving forward. Over time, these patterns begin restoring the rhythm that heartbreak temporarily disrupted. Passion also plays a crucial role in this process. During a relationship, It is common for certain interests or creative pursuits to fade into the background as attention shifts toward shared experiences. When the relationship ends, these dormant passions can become powerful sources of renewal, whether it is writing, music, art, learning new skills, or exploring intellectual ideas. Engaging with something that stimulates your curiosity brings fresh energy into your life. Passion has the ability to redirect emotional intensity toward creation rather than reflection. Instead of replaying the same memories repeatedly, the mind becomes absorbed in building something new. This shift gradually transforms emotional pain into motivation. The same depth of feeling that once belonged to the relationship begins fueling personal growth. Another essential element in healing is self-compassion. Heartbreak often triggers a harsh inner dialogue. People question their decisions, their worth, and their ability to love again. The mind may search for mistakes, assigning blame or imagining alternative outcomes that might have prevented the separation. While reflection can sometimes offer valuable lessons, excessive self-criticism only prolongs emotional suffering. Self-compassion invites a different approach. Instead of treating yourself as someone who failed, you begin seeing yourself as someone who experienced something deeply human. Love, attachment, and vulnerability are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you allowed yourself to care. When a relationship ends, the pain you feel simply reflects the emotional investment that once existed. By responding to yourself with understanding rather than judgment, you create the emotional space necessary for healing. This does not mean ignoring the lessons that relationships provide. Every connection reveals something about our needs, our patterns, and our desires. But learning from these experiences does not require punishing yourself. Growth becomes far more effective when it emerges from curiosity and compassion, rather than guilt. As routine returns, passions awaken, and self-compassion softens the internal dialogue. Something remarkable begins to happen. The emotional landscape that once felt dominated by loss slowly expands again. New experiences enter your days. Conversations with friends become lighter. Moments of curiosity and excitement begin appearing where sadness once filled the space. You may also start noticing something important about your own resilience. Human beings possess an extraordinary capacity to rebuild emotional strength after loss. What once felt like the center of your world gradually becomes one chapter within a larger story. The memories remain, but they lose the power to define your present. Instead of representing the end of something meaningful, they become part of the journey that shaped who you are becoming. With time, the qualities you cultivated during healing discipline through routine, vitality through passion, and kindness toward yourself begin strengthening your overall presence. You carry yourself differently because you have experienced emotional challenge and discovered that you can move through it. This renewed strength often changes the way others perceive you as well. A person who has faced heartbreak and rebuilt their life with intention carries a depth that cannot be manufactured through simple confidence. Their perspective becomes richer because they have felt both attachment and loss. Their empathy grows because they understand the vulnerability that relationships require. And as your life gradually fills again with movement, curiosity, and purpose, the energy that once felt consumed by heartbreak begins transforming into something else entirely. The quiet power of someone who has learned how to return to themselves. When someone passes through periods of growth, heartbreak, learning, and self-discovery, something important begins to change quietly beneath the surface. The way they see themselves shifts. The way they see the world begins shifting as well. What once felt confusing or unpredictable slowly becomes easier to understand, because experience has revealed patterns that were invisible before. At this stage, magnetism no longer feels like something mysterious that only certain people possess. Instead, it starts to look like the natural result of a life that has been intentionally reshaped from the inside out. Many people search for ways to become more interesting, more attractive, or more compelling to others, yet they often begin in the wrong place. They focus on techniques or behaviors designed to capture attention externally, but genuine magnetism rarely begins there. It begins with a change in mindset, a change in the way you interpret your life, your experiences, and the direction you are moving toward. Mindset determines how you interpret almost everything that happens to you. Two individuals can face the same situation and respond in completely different ways depending on how their minds frame the experience. One person may interpret challenges as evidence that life is unfair or that they lack the ability to succeed. Another person may interpret those same challenges as opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow stronger. The external situation is identical, yet the internal response creates two entirely different emotional realities. When someone adopts a mindset oriented toward growth, curiosity, and self-direction, their life begins to expand in ways that gradually become visible to others. Instead of seeing obstacles as reasons to retreat, they see them as information about where improvement is possible. Instead of avoiding unfamiliar situations, they become curious about them. This curiosity leads them into experiences that stretch their perspective and deepen their understanding of the world. Over time, this mindset begins influencing lifestyle as well. Lifestyle is simply the pattern of activities, environments, and habits that fill your days. When someone shifts their thinking toward growth, their lifestyle gradually reorganizes itself around experiences that support that growth. They spend more time learning, exploring, creating, and developing their skills. They choose environments that stimulate their mind rather than draining it. They become selective about how their time is used because they understand that time is the raw material from which life is built. This shift produces an interesting effect on personal energy. A person who lives with curiosity and direction tends to carry a certain vitality into their interactions. Their conversations feel more engaging because they are constantly encountering new ideas and experiences. Their perspective evolves, which makes their thoughts less predictable and more stimulating to discuss. Even simple conversations become interesting because they bring fresh insights into ordinary topics. People naturally notice this type of energy. It feels different from the repetitive rhythm of conversations that revolve around routine complaints or familiar frustrations. When someone speaks with enthusiasm about something they are learning, building, or discovering, their words carry a sense of movement. That movement attracts attention because it suggests that their life is evolving rather than standing still. Another important shift occurs when someone begins viewing their life as something they are actively creating rather than something that simply happens to them. This mindset changes the relationship you have with your environment. Instead of waiting for circumstances to provide inspiration, you begin seeking experiences that generate it. Instead of hoping that life will become more interesting, you begin building a life that feels interesting to you. This orientation toward creation gradually transforms both the inner and outer aspects of your world. Internally, your thoughts become more focused on possibilities than limitations. Your mind becomes accustomed to asking constructive questions. What can I learn from this? How can I improve this situation? What experience would expand my perspective? These questions generate forward momentum because they encourage action rather than passive reflection. Externally, your lifestyle begins reflecting those internal priorities. You spend time in places that stimulate curiosity, with people who encourage thoughtful conversation, and within activities that strengthen your abilities. Your days begin containing moments of discovery rather than repeating the same predictable patterns. This combination of mindset and lifestyle gradually creates an atmosphere around you that others can feel. The person who is constantly learning, experimenting, and exploring tends to appear more alive in conversation. Their enthusiasm is not forced because it grows from genuine engagement with life. When they describe something they are working on or an idea they have recently discovered, the excitement in their voice feels authentic. Authenticity plays a crucial role in magnetism because people instinctively recognize the difference between genuine interest and performative enthusiasm. Someone who is truly fascinated by their own life brings that fascination into their interactions naturally. They do not need to exaggerate or entertain constantly because their curiosity already provides energy to the conversation. Another important aspect of this shift involves the environments you allow yourself to remain in. When someone becomes serious about shaping their mindset and lifestyle, they often become more selective about the influences surrounding them. Conversations that revolve around negativity, environments that encourage stagnation, and habits that drain energy gradually lose their appeal. In their place, the person begins choosing experiences that support growth and clarity. This selectivity is not about judgment, it is about alignment. You begin noticing which environments help you become a better version of yourself and which ones pull you backward into older patterns. As your awareness grows, you naturally gravitate toward people and activities that strengthen your direction. Over time, this alignment creates a life that feels coherent. Your thoughts, habits, environments, and relationships begin supporting the same sense of growth. Instead of moving in conflicting directions, your life develops a rhythm that reflects your evolving identity. That rhythm becomes visible to others because it influences how you speak, how you move, and how you interact with the world. Magnetism, at this stage, is no longer something you try to produce. It becomes the natural atmosphere surrounding a life that is actively unfolding. As your mindset begins to shift and your lifestyle gradually aligns with growth and purpose, something deeper begins taking shape beneath all of it. The habits you practice, the environments you choose, and the ideas you explore slowly begin organizing around a central question. Whether you realize it consciously or not, who do you believe you are? This question may appear simple, but the answer quietly influences almost every decision you make. It determines the risks you are willing to take, the opportunities you believe belong to you, and the direction you allow your life to move. This answer lives within what psychologists often call your self-image. Self-image is the internal portrait you carry about yourself. It is not the image you present to others, and it is not the identity you might wish to display publicly. Instead, it is the deeper picture your mind holds about the kind of person you truly are. When you are alone with your thoughts, when you make decisions without external pressure, when you imagine the future of your life, the boundaries of that image begin shaping what feels possible. Many people underestimate how powerful this inner picture becomes over time. If someone quietly believes they are limited, unremarkable, or destined for ordinary outcomes, their actions often align with that belief, even if they consciously desire something greater. They may hesitate when opportunities appear, avoid challenges that could expand their abilities, or settle into environments that confirm the expectations they already carry. But when someone begins reshaping their self-image, the entire direction of their life can change. This transformation does not require dramatic declarations. It often begins through small acts of alignment. A person starts behaving in ways that reflect the version of themselves they wish to become. They invest time in learning because they see themselves as someone who grows intellectually. They care for their physical and emotional well-being because they believe their life deserves attention. They pursue meaningful goals because they no longer view themselves as someone who must remain confined to the limits of their past. Each action gradually strengthens the new self-image. One of the most effective ways to support this transformation is through the creation of a personal motto. A motto is not merely a motivational phrase repeated occasionally. It is a principle that captures the direction you want your life to follow. When chosen carefully, it becomes a guiding idea that influences how you interpret challenges and opportunities throughout your day. Some people adopt mottos that emphasize growth, reminding themselves that every experience contains a lesson. Others choose principles centered around courage, curiosity, discipline, or compassion. The specific words matter less than the clarity they bring. A strong personal motto becomes a mental compass that helps you navigate situations when uncertainty appears. Imagine waking each day with a simple internal reminder that reflects the identity you are building. It might express the idea that you are someone who learns constantly, someone who meets life with courage, or someone who brings curiosity into every situation. When repeated consistently, this message begins influencing the way you respond to everyday experiences. Instead of reacting automatically to circumstances, you begin asking how the person you are becoming would approach the moment. Would they retreat from this challenge or learn from it? Would they avoid this opportunity or explore it? Would they speak with hesitation or clarity? These questions gradually reshape behavior because they connect your actions with your chosen identity. Over time, your life begins reflecting the image you have been strengthening internally. Living from your highest potential does not mean reaching some final state of perfection. Instead, it means orienting your daily actions toward the most capable version of yourself that you can currently imagine. It is a continuous process of aligning thought, behavior, and intention so that they move in the same direction. When someone lives this way, their presence carries a quiet sense of direction. They may still face uncertainty or difficulty, but they approach those experiences with a mindset that seeks growth rather than avoidance. Their decisions become guided by the question of what will help them evolve rather than what will simply maintain comfort. Others often notice this orientation before the person themselves fully realizes it. When someone consistently behaves in ways that reflect discipline, curiosity, and self-respect, Their presence begins feeling purposeful. Conversations with them carry a sense of clarity because their thinking is anchored in principles rather than momentary reactions. They appear calm in situations where others become uncertain because their decisions follow the direction of their chosen identity. This alignment between self-image and action creates a powerful form of authenticity. Authenticity does not come from announcing who you are. It comes from living in a way that reflects the person you believe yourself to be. When your actions consistently match your internal values, the connection between your inner and outer life becomes stronger. You no longer feel the need to constantly adjust your personality depending on the environment because your identity remains stable across different situations. Living from your highest potential also changes how you interpret setbacks. When challenges appear, they are no longer seen as evidence that you are incapable or unworthy. Instead, they become information about where growth is required. This perspective allows you to remain patient with your own development. Progress becomes a journey rather than a race. As this mindset strengthens, your life gradually becomes an expression of the identity you have chosen to cultivate. The habits you maintain, the conversations you engage in, the opportunities you pursue, and the environments you create all begin reflecting the same underlying story. A story about someone who decided to live not according to the limits of the past, but according to the possibilities of who they are becoming. As a person grows in self-awareness, strengthens their identity, and begins living from a clearer sense of purpose, the way they approach relationships gradually changes as well. Love no longer feels like something mysterious that suddenly appears and disappears without explanation. Instead, it begins to look like a living structure that grows stronger or weaker depending on the emotional maturity of the people involved. Attraction may begin a relationship. Curiosity may deepen it. But lasting love almost always depends on something quieter and far more stable: emotional maturity. Emotional maturity does not mean becoming serious, distant, or overly controlled. It simply means understanding that emotions are powerful signals rather than forces that must control every decision. When someone develops emotional maturity, they learn how to recognize what they are feeling without immediately reacting to those feelings in ways that damage the relationship. They become capable of pausing, reflecting, and responding with intention rather than impulse. In many relationships, conflict arises not because two people care too little about each other, but because they respond to emotional tension without understanding what is actually happening inside them. A moment of frustration turns into criticism. A moment of insecurity becomes accusation. Misunderstandings expand because both individuals react defensively rather than curiously. Over time, these patterns can create emotional distance even between people who genuinely want the relationship to succeed. Emotional maturity interrupts this cycle. When someone is able to recognize their emotions without immediately projecting them onto their partner, the dynamic of conflict begins to change. Instead of reacting with blame, they ask questions. Instead of assuming negative intentions, they remain open to understanding the other person's perspective. This shift transforms disagreements from emotional battles into opportunities for clarity. One of the most important aspects of emotional maturity is the ability to communicate honestly without attacking the other person's identity. Rather than saying, "You always do this," a mature individual might explain how a specific situation made them feel and why it mattered to them. This approach invites conversation rather than defensiveness. It creates space for both people to explore the issue without feeling threatened. Another key element of lasting love is balance. In the earlier parts of our discussion, we explored the importance of maintaining your own life, even within a relationship. That principle becomes even more important when a connection deepens over time. Two people who abandon their individual growth in order to merge completely often find that the relationship begins losing vitality. Without independent interests, goals, and experiences, conversations become repetitive and emotional dependence grows heavier. Balance allows love to breathe. When each person continues pursuing their own development, learning new things, exploring ideas, maintaining friendships, and investing in personal goals, they bring fresh energy back into the relationship. Their experiences enrich their conversations. Their growth inspires mutual respect. Instead of becoming confined to a shared routine, the relationship remains connected to two evolving lives. This dynamic leads to what psychologists sometimes describe as healthy interdependence. Interdependence is different from independence and also different from dependence. Independence suggests that two people remain completely separate, rarely relying on each other for support. Dependence, on the other hand, occurs when one person's emotional stability becomes entirely tied to the presence of the other. Both extremes create imbalance in relationships. Healthy interdependence exists in the middle. In an interdependent relationship, both individuals maintain their own identities, interests, and sense of purpose, yet they also support each other emotionally and practically. Each person knows they can rely on the other during difficult moments, but neither person loses their sense of individuality. The relationship becomes a partnership between two complete individuals, rather than a structure where one person must supply what the other lacks. This balance creates a powerful form of attraction that often strengthens over time rather than fading. When two people respect each other's independence while also nurturing their emotional connection, admiration begins growing alongside affection. They witness each other's development, celebrate each other's achievements, and offer support when challenges appear. The relationship becomes a place where growth is encouraged rather than restricted. Another important ingredient in lasting love is the willingness to keep learning about each other. Many relationships weaken not because affection disappears, but because curiosity fades. Partners begin assuming they already know everything about each other. Conversations become routine. Questions that once sparked discovery are replaced by predictable exchanges. Over time, the sense of exploration that once energized the relationship quietly disappears. Emotionally mature individuals resist this stagnation by remaining curious about the person they love. They understand that human beings are constantly evolving. New experiences, ideas, and challenges continue shaping a person's identity throughout life. By maintaining curiosity, they keep discovering new aspects of the person beside them. This curiosity keeps the relationship alive. Instead of feeling as though they are living beside a familiar but static personality, they experience the relationship as an ongoing journey of discovery. Each stage of life reveals new dimensions of the other person's thoughts, dreams, and perspectives. When emotional maturity, balance, and healthy interdependence come together, the result is a relationship that feels both stable and dynamic. Stability comes from trust, respect, and the ability to navigate challenges without destroying the bond between two people. Dynamism comes from growth, curiosity, and the willingness to continue evolving both individually and together. In this kind of relationship, love becomes more than a feeling. It becomes a structure that supports two lives moving forward side by side, each person maintaining their own direction while choosing, again and again, to walk the path together. If you have followed this journey carefully, you may already notice that everything we explored, from attraction and self-respect to emotional maturity and lasting love, has been quietly pointing toward one central idea. A fulfilling relationship does not begin with another person. It begins within the state of your own mind, the way you think about yourself, the way you treat your emotional life, and the way you care for your mental well-being gradually create the atmosphere from which every relationship in your life emerges. I want you to consider something with me for a moment. Many people enter relationships hoping that love will complete them. They hope another person will bring stability to their emotions, confidence to their identity, or purpose to their life. When someone approaches love this way, the relationship often carries an invisible burden. Instead of two individuals sharing life together, one person becomes responsible for filling emotional spaces that were never theirs to carry. But there is another way to approach love, and this way begins with mental wellness. Mental wellness is not the absence of difficult thoughts or emotions. Every human mind experiences moments of doubt, fear, sadness, or confusion. Mental wellness simply means developing a relationship with your thoughts that allows you to observe them without becoming controlled by them. It means recognizing that thoughts pass through the mind, like weather moving through the sky. Some days are clear, some are cloudy, and some bring storms, but the sky itself remains unchanged. When you begin treating your mind with this kind of awareness, something powerful happens. Instead of reacting automatically to every emotional shift, you become capable of stepping back and observing your internal state. You begin asking yourself gentle questions. What am I feeling right now? Why might this thought be appearing? What would a calmer version of myself say about this situation? This awareness creates space between you and your emotional reactions. Within that space, You begin practicing something that many people misunderstand: self-love. Self-love is not about constantly praising yourself or pretending that everything about your life is perfect. Instead, it is the practice of treating yourself with the same patience and understanding you would offer to someone you care about deeply. When you make a mistake, self-love encourages learning rather than harsh judgment. When you feel sadness or uncertainty, self-love invites compassion instead of criticism. When life becomes difficult, self-love reminds you that your worth is not defined by temporary circumstances. Over time, this internal kindness begins transforming your emotional landscape. Instead of living in constant tension with your own thoughts, you begin feeling more at home within your mind. Your decisions become clearer because they are no longer driven by fear of rejection or the need for constant validation. Your presence becomes calmer because you are no longer fighting yourself internally. This internal stability creates the foundation for manifesting relationships from a place of wholeness. When I say manifesting, I do not mean forcing reality to bend to your wishes or imagining that life will arrange itself magically without effort. Manifestation, in its most practical sense, simply means allowing your inner state to shape the experiences you attract and the choices you make. A person who believes they are incomplete often gravitates toward relationships that reinforce that belief. They may tolerate unhealthy dynamics, overlook incompatibilities, or remain in situations that diminish their well-being because they fear losing connection. Their decisions are influenced by the feeling that they must hold on to love at any cost. But when someone begins living from wholeness, the energy they bring into relationships changes. Wholeness does not mean you no longer desire companionship or affection. It simply means your sense of identity and happiness does not depend entirely on another person's presence. You enjoy connection, but you also recognize that your life already contains meaning, direction, and emotional depth. From this state, relationships become choices rather than necessities. You choose to spend time with someone because their presence enriches your life, not because you feel incomplete without them. You communicate openly because you respect both your needs and theirs. You set boundaries calmly because your sense of worth is stable enough to support them. People often feel the difference when they interact with someone who carries this kind of inner balance. There is a sense of ease in their presence. Conversations feel natural rather than pressured. Affection grows organically because neither person feels forced to fill emotional gaps that belong to the other. Attraction becomes rooted in mutual respect, curiosity, and shared growth rather than dependency. This type of connection tends to be more resilient because it is built on stability rather than emotional urgency. Two individuals who approach love from wholeness bring their complete lives into the relationship. They support each other's dreams rather than replacing them. They encourage each other's independence while also building shared experiences. Their connection becomes a partnership between two evolving individuals rather than a structure designed to repair emotional wounds. And perhaps most importantly, they remain capable of loving themselves, regardless of what happens within the relationship, because self-love and mental wellness do not disappear when circumstances change. They remain as the internal foundation upon which every future experience can be built. When you cultivate that foundation, when you learn to care for your mind, treat yourself with compassion, and live from a sense of inner completeness, something subtle but powerful begins shaping your life. The relationships you invite into your world begin reflecting the same balance you have created within yourself. And from that place, love becomes not something that saves you, but something that grows naturally within a life that was already whole.